Hi everyone, welcome to our online hangout space, hashtag chat up, real talk, real impact. Brought to you by Quarantalk Media and supported by the United States Embassy in the Philippines. I am your host, Marlon Nombrado, and as usual, here on Chat Up, we bring you conversations on social issues and various advocacies. We are live here in the US Embassy. Please join our chat, keep your messages and questions coming and share this live stream using our official hashtags, hashtag chat up, hashtag real talk, real impact. Let's now dive into today's discussion and find out what's up. May 3rd is World Press Freedom Day, a day to support the freedom of the press and upholding standards of journalism, media responsibility, and freedom of expression. As technologies evolve and the digital space widens, misinformation and disinformation proliferate. Journalists and media are also subject to attacks and are now facing new threats. Today on hashtag chat up, real talk, real impact, we will speak to the media practitioners on the role of media in a democracy and also considering the Philippine context. With the conclusion of the 2022 national and local elections, we will revisit the 2022 election coverage and the media landscape in the country. So tune in and keep your comments and questions coming in to join the conversation. At this point, I want to call on our guests. The first to join our panelists is a former political correspondent and chief anchor for the ABS-CBN news channel. He began his career with the Philippine Daily Inquirer, where he covered the presidency, legislature, budget process, foreign affairs, peace talks, health, religion, and crime for 15 years. In 2021, he attended the virtual IVLP, Edward R. Murrow Program for Journalists, Media Responsibility in an Age of Disinformation. It's a joint project for EAP and SCA regions. Our guest hosts his own podcast, Facts First, where he discusses relevant facts and explains burning issues on politics and governance. He also teaches political reporting and press ethics at the University of Santo Tomas in Manila. Let's welcome veteran journalist Christian Esguerra. Morning.
Good morning, Marlon.
Morning. Next up, we have the chairperson of the National Union of Journalists of the Philippines, or NUJP, and also the news section head of the online news site philstar.com. Following their election in March 2021, he and the new set of NUJP officers strongly condemned the red tagging of journalists and vowed to step up the quote campaign against such malicious efforts and hold responsible those behind these systemic attacks, end quote, against the media. He was also one of the speakers in Embassy Jakarta's 2021 World Press Freedom Day Forum, Information as a Public Good. Joining us is Jonathan De Santos. Morning, Jonathan.
Hi.
And lastly, we have our third guest. She is a senior reporter for Rappler, covering Philippine politics and the environment. She started covering politics during the 2016 national elections when she followed the then presidential campaign of then Mayor Rodrigo Duterte. She then became Rappler's Malacanang reporter, producing critical, in-depth, and investigative pieces about the Duterte presidency. She attended the IVLP on the role of journalism in a democratic society program in 2017. Let's welcome Pia Ranada. Morning. So, kompleto na yung ating panel. Welcome Christian, Jonathan, and Pia. We want to start off our conversation, of course, with the most recent context. We're talking about just last week we had the national elections. We want to know from your perspective, how would you best describe the coverage of the Philippine media in the 2022 elections? And was there enough space given to discuss or scrutinize the candidates' platforms? Anyone? I guess we can start with you, Christian.
Go-volunteer ko sana si Pia.
Go muna, Elder.
Sige. Sa akin, enough space to discuss the platforms. Siguro, on the positive side, mas maraming space ngayon to talk about platforms. And there was really more effort on the part of especially legacy media to talk about the specific platforms of specific candidates. That's on the positive side. Pero, I think mas malaki negative side eh. Kasi over the years, Pia and Jonathan would know this, no? Mas tumapang yung media in terms of reporting what we're supposed to be reported, especially during the elections. The problem was the deluge of pushback or disinformation coming from those propagating them. Yung talagang there was a more intense effort to discredit the legacy media, to drown out those voices. Kasi they equate real journalism with dissent. Parang pag nag-report ka critically about a candidate, they would see that as a smear, as a slander. So talagang hindi pinag-uusapan ko ano yung nire-report eh. Sinisira yung nagbabalita. And I think that was one of the tragedies in this campaign.
How about you, Jonathan?
Siguro to add lang, yeah, we tried our best naman to go into platforms, pero may mga times pa rin na we got swept up in the excitement siguro of personalities, no. Dagdag ko lang din, no, yung pushback against us. Yun nga, minsan hindi na siya about issues, minsan it's about a reporter's looks, it's about how a reporter speaks, no. Tapos it's part of this whole campaign nga to discredit media. So it medyo mahirap talaga siya this time.
Para sa akin naman, I think the biggest impact to journalism from these elections is the fact that one of the most important candidates really refused to be interviewed by critical media. So yung naging messaging doon is, you don't need to be interviewed by media. We don't need you to inform the public to win this election. So that has been so bad for media because all this time, diba, dapat we see ourselves as the gatekeepers, and tayo dapat yung parang putting these candidates on the spot to make sure that they respond to the critical issues so that we know their platforms. But the fact that a candidate was able to win by landslide without attending the critical debates, the fora, and the interviews where he will be put on a hot seat about or will be asked tough questions, it makes us confront our work in a different way, questioning whether we still have an impact, in fact, on the political landscape when we can be ignored and diba, walang punishment for that. So yun yung for me malaking nangyari this time around.
You wanna add to that?
Sige, hindi. Kasi ngayon, pinag-uusapan natin critical thinking, di ba? Parang ngayon hindi critical thinking yung pervasive eh. Parang critical ignorance. Yung parang yung tao, nagiging passionate sila about their convictions, but the basis of those convictions are a fraud. Diba? Tama yung sinabi ni Pia, diba? Saka nakakita ng winning candidate. The fact na pinag-uusapan natin ngayon, sasabihin nila mga anti-Marcos kayo eh. It's not eh. Parang this is how we're supposed to cover any president, especially a president with a lot of baggage. Sasabihin nila, yung critical ignorance, sabihin nila, eto yung conviction ko, kayo puro kayo bobo, puro kayo tanga. Pero ano ba yung pinagbasihan nun? Diba fake information? So can you imagine a president winning without actually addressing those critical issues? Kasi they found out na they could get away with it. Ito lang, very basic example. Bakit hindi ka pwedeng dumiretso as a news consumer doon sa politiko o kandidato? Saka nakakita ng politiko na ilalabas yung mga mali niya, yung baggage niya, yung baho niya as a candidate, yung ill-gotten wealth issues. Hindi niya pag-uusapan yun. Tatabunan niya yun, di ba? So, sino magkakalkal nun? Yung media. Kasi may epekto yun doon sa tao pag siya'y nanalo. So, hindi alam ng mga tao ngayon na sasabihin, ay kayo, critical kayo kay Bongbong kasi galit kayo sa kanya. Hindi. We're actually serving you. Ginagawa namin hindi para sa sarili namin para sa inyo. Yun ang hindi nila naintindihan.
Actually, yun yung napapansin ko ngayon, yung parang tension between the media institutions, especially the legacy media, traditional media outlets, and their audiences. No, na parang there are studies that talk about the decline of trust in media institutions in general. And ano yung take nyo doon? Parang how do you position yourself as a journalist in this kind of landscape? Do you simply do you lecture on your audiences that hey, we are nice people, we are not biased? Paano nyo pinoposition yung sarili nyo sa ganong klase ng konteksto ngayon?
Well, yung effort ng mga newsrooms nakita natin ngayon, they're going to where the readers are. Like if before we were stuck in our websites, in our newspapers, now we're going to TikTok. Napapansin niyo yun, di ba? Instagram stories. Pati naman sa New York Times nakita natin or Washington Post, they also do this. But sa atin kasi parang mas urgent yung need to go to where they are because a lot of the Filipinos now, they don't go to newspapers anymore. They just keep to their social media accounts for their news. Minsan TikTok na lang yung source of information about their candidates. So, in some ways, even if you might say na parang we're changing our ways so drastically for the readers, but on another side is we have to do this. Parang maging relevant pa rin tayo sa buhay nila. Kailangan pumunta tayo kung saan sila. And nandun sila sa TikTok, nandun sila sa Instagram. So, we have to meet them where they are. So, I think that's one effort that newsrooms are taking now. And also being more transparent about the process of journalism. Like, we have sa Rappler, for example, yung reporters pag nagta-TikTok or gumagawa ng mga videos, parang in-explain, parang pinapakita namin yung human side namin. Kasi nakita natin na the reason why some people are attracted to vloggers and online personalities is because they see them as normal and they understand that they have feelings and, parang may mas personable sila. So, at least kami sa Rappler, we're trying to engage in that way just to show that, we're not like these monolithic people na walang, na ano lang, puro tira-tira lang. We have our own judgment and we have judgment calls to make in our job. May podcast kami about covering the campaign in an effort to show people na, di ba, ano yung mga issues na surrounding coverage na hindi lang siya writing negative news for the sake of it, but because job namin yun. Things like that. Parang small efforts lang.
Yeah. Aside from the adjustments that are done by, for example, for Pia and Rappler, sa Philippine Star or maybe experiences of other colleagues?
Well, we have been going into platforms then. Pero ang gusto rin namin gawin really is relevance pa rin. Na for example, may magandang soundbite yung isang kandidato. Let's say, pagawa tayo ng pambansang gasolinahan. Ganda yan eh. Tapos, usually ang treatment dyan is, agree ba tayo na magkakaroon yan? Gusto ba natin yan? So, baka pwede rin natin tinan, paano ba yan gagawin? Feasible ba yan? Gagana ba siya? No? So, I think more than yung soundbite, more than yung sobrang gandang promise, we try to look into how it will be done. Hindi naman siya baho necessarily, hindi siya negative. Parang baka nga hindi pa alam nung kandidato paano ba ito gagawin. So we try to show them then na baka ganito yung path na gusto mong gawin.
I wanna know, yung mga ganitong adjustments, itong mga innovations na ginagawa ng mga media outlets, of course, obviously, it's a result of itong rise of disinformation, of post-truth. Is there any instance na parang nagba-backfire siya? Or it's not well accepted within the journalism community? Because, for example, there are more veteran journalists who try to, cling on the foundations of journalism na dapat straightforward lang, facts lang talaga, you don't show any emotions, you don't show your biases, you don't make the news about you, for example. It's one of the things that we try to avoid. Pero, may adjustment ngayon yung journalists na hindi ba siya tinatanggap minsan ng, I don't know, more senior colleagues of yours?
Siguro less so now. Earlier, mga 2016, medyo kailangan kasi dignified pa yung media, kailangan above the fray tayo, no? For Philstar, we tried to make it a little more fun. Gumagamit kami ng like memes, gumagamit kami ng inside jokes, I guess. Hindi naman siya commentary per se, pero parang it adds some context. I guess it adds some info. Pero yeah, may pushback against that. And it's an ongoing conversation, I guess, with the more
Right.
seniors, with the more senior journalists in the community.
Mhm. Naalala ko yung sinasabi niya, yung sa meme na ginagawa nila. Una, I had a bit of discomfort na nakita kong ginagawa nila on Twitter.
Mhm.
Siguro the lolo in me, quote unquote, parang
Yeah.
gave rise to that discomfort. Pero sooner than later, na-realize ko, sabi ko tama itong ginagawa nila.
Mhm.
Kasi parang ngayon, hindi na pwedeng, we would stick to the traditional means or platforms in terms of delivering the news and contextualizing them.
Mhm.
Kasi paano ka makikipag-compete dun sa dun sa influencer o dun sa
Right.
mga nagkakalat na mga memes. Ngayon kasi hindi na angles ng story siya nagdi-dictate ng conversation eh.
Mhm.
Titingnan lang nila yung mga quote cards. Yun na yun eh. So
Mhm.
magandang ginawa nila actually looking back. Sabi ko dapat pala ito yung paraan.
Mhm.
Parang we need to actually repopulate these platforms
Mm-mm.
using the traditional clout of media and exploring more avenues for clout. Ginagamit ko in terms of SOCMED eh.
Cloud
Oo,
chasing.
although nakakabuisit syempre yung mga cloud chasers, diba? Pero why
True.
don't you use that to your advantage?
Mhm.
Ayun.
Siguro, before I go to UP, yung because you also wear another hat as a teacher in UST, no? So, do you also see adjustments in journalism programs, how journalism is being taught
Mm.
to journalism students today?
Oo. Kaya meron kaming regular parang re-evaluation of the curriculum of the syllabus tsaka yung syllabi. Kasi nga, yung dapat pinoproduce ng estudyante, dapat nandun yung skill set that would be needed by the industry.
Mhm.
Siyempre, nandun yung basic, diba? Hindi ka pwede magpag-graduate na hindi mo na magsulat, diba? Yung subject-verb agreement. Pero the
Mhm.
rest, yung ibang mga platforms, ina-adapt namin sa school eh. Kasi kailangan eh. Although much of the education will actually happen outside eh.
Yeah.
Totoo yun.
Oo nga.
Sa field.
Ikaw, Pia.
Ako, I noticed initially, like 2016, may discomfort talaga with when journalists became the story. Especially when Duterte was saying, di ba, parang may nag-on the spot siya, yung wolf whistling at Maris Umali, things like that, parang the banning of Rappler from Malacanang. So, may discomfort talaga. Do we write about this when it's our competitor? May mga ganun pong issues eh. But I think as time went by, we're slowly realizing na hindi naman ginusto ng media na maging storya. Like, syempre yung gusto lang naman namin, magtrabaho sa Malacanang, sa beats namin, like quietly doing our work. But once they attack us, di ba? Parang if you stay silent, it's like you're letting them do it, step over you. So, you kind of have to shine the light on what's happening so that people understand also what's at stake and what's being attacked. Because if you don't know who your enemy is attacking, you don't know the nature of your enemy. So slowly we're starting to realize na anyway, press freedom is under attack. How can you not write about it? Kaya sa Rappler, nagka-media beat nga kami, parang to cover the ABS-CBN shutdown, right? Like, how can you not write about that? Kahit competitor mo sila, parang come on, how can you not talk about that when there's still like an important pillar of democratic society, no matter, how you're competing for viewerships or whatever, diba? So, I think though na we're starting to see that happening more, na media issues are being covered more now, especially under the incoming yung Marcos campaign and the incoming presidency.
Right. Of course, we're here today because we are observing May 3, World Press Freedom Day. And Reporters Without Borders released their annual report, no, 2022 World Press Freedom Index. And for Philippines, we further declined this year from 138th to 147th. So I want to know, how do you explain the typical counter argument claiming that press freedom in the Philippines is alive and well? Some would say it's extremely vibrant. And obviously it's contrasting to what Reporters Without Borders is saying. So how do you usually explain this in your stories or when you are invited in workshops, for example?
All right. I think madalas sinasabi na we're the freest press in Asia, ganyan. Pero sobrang 60s, 70s pa yung mga ganong pananaw, no? Totoo naman nga na we can publish, no? So we have that freedom. Pero at what cost minsan eh, parang yun nga, we've been talking about yung chilling effect na parang magpo-pause ka ba before you write a story, ay isipin mo ba kung ano ba ang, kunyari may balik ba to sa mga kasama ko, may balik ba to sa akin, ano? We really can't say that there is no pressure to shape coverage, no? And it really is up to yung newsrooms na rin, how they push back, no? Pero yung reality na for example, a government official can threaten you with libel or actually sue you for over a story, no? I think pinapakita nito na hindi rin talaga tayo free, no? The government can say, yung Presidential Task Force on Media Security can say it's better now, no? Pero kailangan din natin tingnan na yung struggle for press freedom sa mahabang project din to eh. So it doesn't really matter. Parang sige, it's interesting if it's better under this administration or if it was worse under another administration. Pero yung haba niyan, kailangan natin siyang tingnan ng buo.
Ako dagdag ko lang. Dapat yung freest in Asia or vibrant press, dapat may asterisk lagi yun eh, in the Philippine context. To quote a veteran journalist na kilala natin lahat, diba? Si Santos. I think ito yung maganda illustration eh. Yes, we're free, but what happens to you after exercising that freedom is the question. For example, lahat naman kami we're familiar with the idea of self-restraint. Pero self-restraint is different, vastly different from self-censorship. Nairamdam natin sa maraming newsrooms. Kunwari, pinukpok mo yung issue ng, kunwari, ill-gotten wealth ni Bongbong Marcos. Siya na yung panalo eh. Marami mga newsrooms ngayon takot. Sasabihin, bias ka masyado. Or, bakit mo ba tinututukan yan? Ordinarily, in different times not so long ago, pag-uusapan mo talaga yun because that's the biggest story in the country. Hindi mo siya pwedeng i-ignore. Pero bakit conveniently ini-ignore? Kasi yung mga news organizations, in particular, news owners, not exactly the news managers, the news owners, they're imposing that self-censorship. Diba? To be frank about it.
Right.
Eh, makikita mo, we're free kasi nakakapag-publish, nakakapagsalita ng ganito, diba? Pero what happens after exercising that freedom? That's the question. You might lose your job. You might get even more intense pressure. Kawawa yung mga colleagues mo. Kaya ginagawa na iba, nagiging default mentality, I just work here eh. I just weather the storm.
Just a job.
Basta bubuhay ngayon yung mga fence-sitters or worse, yung mga enablers, di ba? We also have enablers in our ranks, di ba? Yung talagang kahit sino administration sumisip-sip eh, di ba? May ganun talaga.
Tsaka for me, yung argument kasi ng government is, nagsusulat pa naman sila, ganun. It's like if someone attacks a person just sitting down there and that person fights back. That doesn't mean that the person A never attacked person B just because, he's fighting pa naman and they're fighting back naman, they're alive. Pero parang conveniently leaving out the fact that nagka-attack in the first place. Kaya nga sila di ba? Parang nag-aalboruto ngayon. So, yun, like everything that's happened, yung ABS-CBN shutdown, the cases against Maria Reyes, I mean, lahat yan, di ba? Parang, even if targeted yung specific few that's being used, parang sinasampulan sila na we can do this to them, so we can do this to you. So that chilling effect, you can't measure it, you can't see it outright, you can still read their articles, but what is being written about, what is not being written about, that's what you should look for.
Siguro isang example ng chilling effect kung if ever that could be measured. Yung paggamit ng term na son of the late dictator.
Yep.
Pinag-uusapan yan hanggang ngayon. Pero established fact yan. Ano dapat mo sabihin? Hindi mo babanggitin na son of the late dictator si Bongbong Marcos. Ngayon nagsisecond guess yung mga marami sa amin, di ba? Pinapagalitan yung iba, di ba? Sabihin, huwag mong gamitin yan. Mali yan, that's bias. That's not journalism. Ano ba dapat?
Right.
Former senator.
Former senator.
Hindi kasi nawawala yung context, di ba?
Oo, exactly. It has to be said talaga.
Yeah. All three of you have been accused or tagged as biased, bayaran, right? You all had that experience. Of course, I congratulate you for your resilience, for still being here. But of course, that kind of practice is something that we don't want to be normalized, to be seen as something that is acceptable. But at this point, we also recognize that maybe the general public really doesn't know or has difficulties really telling who is biased, who is not. So maybe you can just share your ideas. How do you explain to people really this thing called media bias, which is always thrown around? And sometimes, syempre, when you do your work on a daily basis, daily grind ng reporter, you just do what you do, right? And then you don't really have the time to put at the bottom of your story hey, I'm not a biased reporter or
Mhm.
something. Pero how do you explain it?
Kung
Yan,
muna.
sir.
Huh.
Okay.
Ako, if you're truly a critical journalist na wala kang kinikilingan, you're not gonna please everyone all the time.
Mhm.
So parang, diba, like, I think that's what people should understand nga, is yung, pag nagsusulit kami ng quote-unquote negative articles about yung politician na gusto nila, hindi ibig sabihin na ginagawa lang namin yun. Kasi wala lang, gusto na namin manira. Hindi talaga. Kasi ginagawa namin yun kasi para sa amin, kailangan mong malaman yung mga bagay na ito. And yung thing kasi that nangyayari ngayon, especially with the presidential campaign of Marcos Jr., yung unity messaging, sinasabi nila na parang, wag na tayo mag-away-away, ano na lang, good vibes na lang. They're really running on a good vibes campaign. And that's what people are taking to heart na, porket if parang siraan yung trip ko, parang ayoko tapanginggan kasi gusto ko lang happy-happy. Pero talaga, gusto mo talaga maging happy-happy pero bulag-bulagan. Siyempre, ayaw natin yun. That's why, parang sobrang dangerous ng concept na yun na porket negative, paninira na. Hindi talaga. Parang, we're doing this for you. We're doing this so that you can choose with both eyes open. And really assess the leaders with both eyes open. So, feel ko yun yung pinaka critical thing that people should know. And, in fact, if may journalist kang binabasa na lahat ng articles niya positive, dun ka mag-alala. Yun yung bias. Yun yung baka binayaran or baka takot. I mean, yun yung parang um, putting their job as a journalist secondary to like survival. We can understand some people, like it's a job for them. But yun nga, if you're talking about bias, di ba? Yung tao na puro good vibes ang sinusunod, baka yun yung kailangan questionin.
Yeah.
Na bakit parang hindi na siya naging critical sa kanyang kino-cover.
Mhm. Mhm.
Sige.
Yun na yan.
Nagdadagdag lang ako ng konti. Parang try doing this, yung mga taong naguguluhan sa bias, no? Wala rin si Pia. Wala, ikaw na lang muna gamitin. Kunwari si
Case
Pia,
study.
ang tingin sa kanya ng mga pro-Marcos supporters, Marcos supporters, si Pia bias yan against Marcos. Pag si Pia ba, nagising sa isang umaga, tapos nare-report niya lahat, hallelujah, for Bongbong Marcos. Sabi niya, the greatest president, kahit hindi pa nakaupo, talagang the voice of unity, etc., etc. Talagang binura niya sa alaala, sa kasaysayan, sa court records, yung issue ng ill-gotten sa pamilya niya. Pag naging ganun ba yung reporting ni Pia Ranada, sasabihin niyo pa rin ba siya ng bias? I don't think so. Sasabihin nila, yan ang journalist. Objective.
Mhm.
So yung conclusion ko? Most of you do not understand the meaning of bias. Dapat alam niyo yung difference between bias and partisanship. Ang mga journalists, katulad ng kahit sinong tao, may biases. Kunwari ikaw, kausap mo sorry, mali yung term. Iba example na lang. Isang masamang tao, isang mabuting tao. Pero kang tools sa journalist na ginagamit to be able to know kung sino yung sasabi ng tama at hindi. Di ba? You don't need to wait for the court decisions for those arguments to be completed for a news report. Worse kung meron talagang court record na eh. Di ba? Kasi nasabi ko, bias ka kung sino yung tama. Hindi yung magiging objective ka just because you want to be convenient, di ba? So, yun dapat yung i-recognize natin.
Right. Sa amin, for example, in our organization, Media Literacy Org, we try to explain to people that, as Christian said earlier, bias is not something that is only manifesting sa work ng journalists, even if yun yung lagi nating nakikita online, right? Bayaran, biased. Bias is actually an everyday thing for all people, for the general public. So instead of simply being critical doon sa reporter or dun sa report, try to be critical sa sarili mo, your own opinions, your own feelings, emotions towards stories. And tingin ko yun yung isa sa mga kulang na we're not seeing it in our curriculum, for example, yung determination of your own biases, reflecting on your own leanings, kumbaga. We actually have here a question from Zoom. It's coming from Sir Felipe Salvosa,
Nice.
UST.
Sir Ife.
He asks, how do you feel about publishing news in Filipino? We are not being read by a majority of readers who prefer to read their news in the national or regional languages.
Kami, we've started to do our VOs or reports in Tagalog. Ako nga, nag-Tagalog ako for this campaign. And napapansin ko nga mas maraming bumabasa sa amin pag scripts namin are in Filipino. Conversational lang naman, like Taglish. Tsaka meron din kaming, nagbukas rin kami ng mga regional bureaus. So we have reports in Bisaya, and we also have a new bureau in Mindanao. So I think that has really improved our coverage. So we're really trying. We're really doing our best to reach as many people as possible.
Right.
Yeah, kailangan nga siya talaga din, no? Pero kasi alam naman din natin na may favored pa rin ng English kasi nga supposedly it's the more intelligent language, no? Pero there have been pero hindi yun totoo. There have been efforts naman na palakasin yung reporting in Filipino, and hindi na Filipino, kahit parang medyo mas conversational pa. Na-bring up ni Ian kanina yung anyari, no, yung show namin on Philstar, na parang hindi mo na bababa, hindi mo siya i-dumb down or ano, parang gagawin mo lang mas relatable. At Tagalog lang siya, may mga inside jokes, ganyan. Minsan may naglalakad sa background. Wala siyang kinalaman sa anything. Parang ano lang, mas engaging lang, I suppose. And totoo naman, underserved nga talaga siguro ang readers in Filipino and other languages, no. Ako mismo, siguro kailangan ko pa siyang aralin paano gawin. Pero yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Yes.
Agree.
Right. There's this study that was published by Media Monitoring Lab from UP. It's on the Metapartisan YouTube channels, and talking about how the rise of these channels have really affected this particular elections. I wanna get your perspective on that. No, ano yung sa tingin ninyo? How do these Metapartisan news channels, especially those that are hosted in YouTube, affect your work as journalists? No, obviously there are legitimate, like genuine, not troll accounts who are watching, getting their quote unquote news from these sources. How are we supposed to, deal with them?
Hirap ng tanong eh.
Sa Metapartisan pa lang medyo.
Solutions kasi. Ang hirap pag-usapan ng solutions eh. Sa totoo lang, no?
Oo. Kasi kailangan united yung media in addressing.
Ako honestly like kasi, yung I don't know whether they would agree with me, no? Yung sa fact-checking initiative na to, tama yung ginagawa natin lahat eh. Pero mas maganda in Filipino.
Okay.
Pero kahit siguro 98% of the legacy media, mag-fact check, lahat ng mga matitinong news organizations, lahat yung reactive eh. Hindi mo siya mahahabol eh.
Right.
Di ba napakadali magkalit-kalit ng chismis ngayon, di ba? Miski out of nowhere. Ang bilis yan eh. Hindi namin mahahabol yun. Di ba? So ano yung solution? Ang daming problema eh. Pag-usapan natin yung tech giants, di ba? Meron sila responsibility. Ako ito recently lang, ito yung naisip ko baka pwede makatulong. I hate this term, pero gustong-gusto ko dahil new discovery ko, as I mentioned before, yung cloud chasing sa social media. Di ba maraming Apple sa social media?
Yep.
Eh marami rin Apple from the media, di ba, ng mga cloud chasers. Kasi doon nabubuhay yung iba eh. Di ba? They're using their cloud to propagate fake information. Kaya ako, I'm suggesting really, yung mga taong may cloud na matitino, pagpaliban niyo muna yung mga sugod bahay content nyo. Pagpaliban niyo na muna yung ibang inanities. Kasi mas mabigat yung problema ngayon eh. Diba? Alay ko example dyan. Kahit sino sa amin magsalita about Italiana Gold, mayroong makikinig, diba? Pero ilang yung followers namin? What if yung mga ilang milyong followers? Sabihin, peke yung promotion na yan. Ito pinapakalat niya mali. Huwag po kayo makinig dyan. Maraming makikinig sa kanila eh. And that pool includes the celebrities. Kasi kami sa journalism, pinag-aaralan pa namin yung yung other platforms eh. Pero iba nandun eh.
So engage na lang with them.
Oo. O yung mga pa-celebrity sa media, try to do your work.
Celebrity sa media. Bayaran ng mga politicians. Alam naman natin may ganun, diba? But the ones who are doing it out of their own, right? Kasi they want to influence. Then baka open pa sila doon. Yeah, I agree. Actually.
That's one suggestion, no?
Naisip ko lang recently kasi nga sayang yung opportunities eh.
Yeah. Especially in the recent election, we saw one candidate, no? Na talagang bumuhos yung suporta from celebrities na ang assumption is hindi naman sila bayad, right? So maybe the press can also garner support from them by that means. Other ideas. Na-mention na pala ni Christian, of course, yung how we're supposed to demand accountability from the platforms, right? But that's another discussion. But doon sa, we recognize the limitations of journalists, pero as you mentioned earlier, meron na kayong mga adjustments, innovations. So if we stretch further even yung limitations na ng journalism, ano pa kaya yung mga pwede nitong gawin in order to deal with this? Emergent kasi yun yung partisan news channels na parang they really thrive as if they are legitimate players in journalism. So, paano kaya?
Kapag nag-iisip sila, yun na, example yun ng bias, di ba? Bakit hindi bias yung tingin nila sa ganong media? Yun ang talagang bias, di ba?
Right.
Ayan, example yun.
Actually, pinag-usapan namin, we thank all of these partisan channels. Dumami yung case studies namin. Dumami yung examples namin when we do our workshops, lessons. Ito, manood kayo ng channel na ito. You'll see what kind of stuff we try to protect you from or the kind of stuff we want you to be critical about.
I would like to think yung reliability ng media would win out in the end, no? Over yung relevance. Kunyari, sikat sila ngayon, ano? Pero kunyari, may bagyo or meron kang critical na decision talaga na kailangan gawin. Na sa media ka pa rin pupunta or mapapakita ng media na kami talaga yung maasahan nyo, no? Although possibly very optimistic, no? Kasi given how 2016, yung years from 2016 turned out, no? Pero siguro yun lang, tuloy pa rin yung hindi yung how we do it, pero yung rigor of our reporting siguro. Napaka 2016 na sagot na.
Pero okay lang. Tama naman yun kasi parang you really want to stick to yung foundations of journalism and really tell them, okay, this is what you need. Pero yun nga, given the experiences we had over the course of 6 years, for example, any specific experiences you had na you told yourself, hindi na to nag-work. Parang I've been trying na we've been producing these kinds of stories or we've been doing it this way na parang talong-talo talaga kami sa fake news. So, parang how did you work around that?
Kami sa Rappler, we work kasi on very long form things. Like investigative namin on formally on Michael Yang. Yung ginagawa namin, alam naman namin na hindi babasahin yung buong thing ng maraming tao. So gumawa kami ng, kumbaga parang TikTok intro about it. Para lang may access point yung mga tao to know na, may ganito yung Rappler, may investigation. So ganun, parang introduce your long form in a way where in the platform they're in a way that's very relatable, easy to understand, and then just hope that they might be curious enough to go to the original report. So ginagawa namin, parang repurpose namin yung content namin into TikTok or Instagram story or whatever, para lang may hook. Tapos diba, parang mali mo, may ma-curious, tapos basahin yung buong thing. But I really think that long form can coexist with the more hip, social media content. It's just a matter of parang finding that thread of interest that people will have, no matter what form it takes, diba? Yung question lang na, kinurakot ba yung farmer yung contracts ng pandemic? Diba? Parang, feel ko naman, people would want to know that. Diba? Some people would want to read about that. So, parang informal lang sila na may ganito kami, wherever they are. Tapos baka pumunta sila sa'yo.
Okay. We have here a question from Facebook, since we mentioned, the role of social media platforms and the press freedom issue. Is there a way developing countries like ours can make big tech companies accountable? They have been complicit in the proliferation of fake news and ultimately the erosion of democracy. Meron nga ba?
There's always a way. Ang problema, makikinig ba? Although lately, mas nakikinig ang Facebook, diba? Tsaka Google. Pero I don't think that's enough. Kasi ang hirap all other countries are struggling with this. Do you regulate that? Do you at the expense of press freedom or freedom of expression or speech? mahirap, di ba? Sino ilalagay mong tao in specific countries to monitor the content. Kasi sila operating outside the Philippines. Naintindihan mo na yung context, for example. Ngayon, nagugulat ako, may mga nagme-message siya nagpapadala ng videos. Mga OFWs, yung workplace daw nila brainwashed. Sabi ko, bakit? Pinadala yung video. As in, napaka-outrageously fake information, fake history. Kaya daw napaka-passionate ng mga office mates niya. Tapos, pinag-iinitan siya kasi kinokorek niya. And how do you fix that? Yung credibility mismo ng media sinisira eh. Diba? So sa akin talagang pag-usapan yan. Ako nga, nasusuya na ako sa usapan na there should be an ongoing conversation. Pero by this time, dapat may solution na, diba? Sa akin dapat mas aggressive siguro sa ngayon yung big tech companies, yung tech giants, they should do more drastic action regarding that. Tsaka they have to review their algorithm kasi mas pang marketing yung ginagawa nila eh. Parang they have to provide even more opportunities sa algorithm patterns nila for real information to flourish.
Agree.
Kasi kailangan pa rin pag-aralan yung algorithm nila for us to be on top of the information chain. Nakikipag-compete kami sa iba. Alam naman nila kalokohan yung iba eh, di ba? That can be done by technology. And they have to realize yung ginagawa nila, even if they're private companies, they're doing something of public interest.
How about you? Any additions to that?
Yun naman yun. Pero alam rin natin na, for example, si Duterte vetoed, right, yung dapat Facebook registration bill. So, there's also that na will our leaders be willing to even help in that effort? And I also think that it could come from legislation, diba? The necessary reforms that we could safeguard our social media space with. Syempre, though, we have to guard also against yung possible violations on freedom of speech. So, talagang balancing act siya eh. But there might be a way in legislation. I think may mga ongoing conversations na rin about legislation na baka pwedeng gawin para to, just to curb the spread of disinformation.
Okay, bawal na natin gamitin yung phrase na yun ulit. Nasusuya na si Crystal. Pero even this program is about that, right? Conversations. Just to bring up that point again, from UNESCO, for example, you're saying that to deal with disinformation, there are at least 4 approaches: the investigative, reporting, fact-checking part, the media literacy, media education part, and then the 2 others, which is, I think, what we're lacking right now, is yung policy and legislation part, and the changes when it comes to the platforms, the distribution mechanisms. So, for example, for us, for reporters, for journalists, for teachers, I think we need to carry some of the load of these two pathways na nagkukulang nga eh. Like, for example, how can we generate policies kahit local lang, like Philippines? Of course, we need to lobby them. We need to mainstream these conversations na hindi yung tayo-tayo lang yung nag-uusap. Of course, it's easier said than done, right? But yun yung frustrating thing din eh, na parang over the course of 6 years, we've experienced enough already, pero it seems no one cares, or tayo-tayo lang yung may pakialam din sa concern na yun. I actually have a question here directed to Jonathan.
Yes.
Perspective from NUJP. We want to know what are provincial journalists most struggling with, perhaps in the context especially of the elections, and how can they be best supported?
Primary dyan would be pay, yung precarity of media work in the provinces or in the regions. Kasi dito nga sa Manila medyo hirap na tayo, pero sa ibang provinces ang pay is like 150 per piece, minsan 50 pesos per photo kung magamit. So ang hirap mabuhay bilang journalist, tas yun, ma-open, doon ka magiging mas vulnerable na, kunyari, maghahanap ka ng friendly politician, let's say, or magiging friendly ka to a certain government agency dahil kahit sabihin natin walang budget. kahit di ka binibigyan ng pera no, or anything like that, kung facilitated yung coverage mo, for example, dadaling ka sa, let's say, a demo farm, no expenses ka dyan, may libreng story ka na basically, no? Ayun, so tas mas mahirap din na mag-ikot, na magharap ng sariling storya dahil nga it doesn't really, parang it doesn't pay. At pangalawa pa doon, yung mas prone sila to harassment. Mas malapit sila, kunyari, mas kilala sila ng local police, mas kilala sila ng local politicians, ganyan, no? So, mas madali mag-reach out to them and sabihan sila na siguro tumahimik, ganyan. And yun, constant naman din yung threat of red tagging, no? Na if you cover, for example, human rights cases, or if you cover land disputes, there is always that risk na malilabel ka as NPA or CPP, ganyan, no? And very successful siya in the regions, and nakikita na rin natin siya ngayon sa Metro Manila, no? It's happening also to our colleagues here.
Right.
Ay, sorry, may second part pala yung support,
Yeah,
no?
you support.
Yun, so support would always be, at least a community would be to call out pag may under attack na colleague, no? Yung, or kunyari, tinag siya as, yun nga, as a rebel or ano. Yung sa pay, medyo, ano rin yan, one of the parang continuing conversations din yan, no? Pero it's something that we have to address talaga dahil hindi lalakas yung community media until issues like that are addressed.
We've talked about a lot when it comes to the challenges that we're facing journalists. What do you tell young people, right, who are aspiring to become journalists like you? What do you tell them?
Go.
Go,
We need,
go
we need
lang.
young blood. That's seryoso. We
Yeah.
need idealistic people in order to parang enliven or to energize the ranks of the media. Kasi, yan, maraming burnt out, maraming jaded kasi sa nangyayari. So, we need that optimism, that injection of optimism to bring the industry forward. Kasi talagang it's really with innovation, with, alam na natin yung Gen Z, magaling sa TikTok, magaling sa, so diba, they might be able to innovate a new way of storytelling that could, I don't know, like create more trust with readers, with news consumers. So, go lang. Pero word of warning, syempre, hindi madali yung trabaho. Hindi talaga siya glamorous. I mean, don't expect na parang red carpet. As in, mahirap siya. But then, parang, we need you. We need new people. We need new ideas. So, go for it.
Yeah, may additional words of ano ba kayo?
Hindi naman,
Encouragement.
Word of warning.
Hindi, totoo naman, we need new journalists, no? We need young journalists. Pero siguro, sa part naman ng media companies, no, hindi rin siguro dapat natin isipin na, ay, dami naman nakapila dyan, ang daming papalit. Kunyari, medyo hindi maganda yung working conditions ng colleagues natin. Ano? Minsan sasabihin ng management is, okay lang, marami nang papalit sa if you can take it, quit,
Disposable,
diba? Pero, hindi siya nakakatulong sa atin in the long run. Sige, may bago ka na namang ititrain, di ba? May bagong tao papasok, may bago ka na namang ititrain. Tapos pag na-burnout yan, alis na naman. So yeah, kailangan natin ng bagong tao, pero also we need to treat them better. So hindi talaga yung to aspiring journalists, mas mga bosses.
Sakat no? Pero I agree, totoo yun. Sa akin, tama, I agree doon sa mga sinabi nila. Parang we need more journalists now. Mas kailangan ngayon. Pero kailangan proper yung training, yung mindset, tapos yung character. Kasi hindi pwedeng puro skills, di ba? Hindi pwedeng puro character. So dapat pareho talaga eh. Kasi yung papasukin yung mundo, mukha siyang glamorous kasi siguro nakikita niya yung byline, yung TV. Pero hindi eh. Pag sineryoso mo yung trabaho mo, talagang siya, ang term ngayon, mental health, di ba? Kasi nung pumasok kami sa industry, hindi naman pinag-uusapan yung mental health issues eh. Pero yan, mararanasan nyo ngayon yan as a journalist. Hindi lang burnout yan eh. Yung tipo bang kada story na ilalabas mo, dati kasi in perspective, you have to be able to defend your story once it's made public. Parang thesis yan eh. And it has to stand the test of a lot of intense scrutiny. Ngayon iba eh. Hindi titirahin yung story mo. Titirahin ka.
Ikaw mismo.
Titirahin yung company mo. i-discredit ka para ma-ease out ka sa conversation. Kasi kailangan yung mga kasinungalingan yung pinag-uusapan eh. And you have to be ready for that if you want to be a journalist.
Mhm. Kaya nga parang bukod dun sa burnout, minsan meron ng existential crisis talaga na why am I here? What am I doing? Is there even a greater purpose that I'm trying to achieve? No? Dahil nga yung maganda yung sinabi ni Christian doon, no? Yung difference. We also have another question from Zoom. If I may ask, as we transition to the new administration, we seem to be moving past the 2016 view of things as well. Is there a stark change that the general public should be on board with in terms of consuming information? What should the Filipino news consumer anticipate?
I think since we're talking to educators in this gathering, it should be. I really think our teachers should teach our children that it should be second nature to question what they read online. The same way that it's second nature to us to say opo, po, thank you, diba? Wash your hands before you eat. Dapat ganun parang ano yun, ingrained sa mga bata na before you consume any news, diba? Parang check mo kung sino nag-post. Check mo kung totoo ba yan yung may quote ba talaga na attributed to a source, whatever. So I think that's one step we should take. Like that's one thing we should start doing now in preparation for, the years ahead. And it's not just the Marcos presidency, but we're looking at decades of possible disinformation dominating diba, our social media and everything. So yun, talagang for educators, parang it really has to start there. You have to start that critical thinking young. It has to be a muscle that comes into action every time they are exposed to information.
Agree.
Agree.
Well
But
said.
tama yun eh, no, na parang, again, just the education sector trying to support journalism, the press, kasi there's too much to carry talaga. There's too much burden sa shoulders ng journalists, ng reporters, na hindi naman talaga nila magagawa yun eh. Na parang, of course, there are a lot of interdisciplinary engagement between the media and education. Pero nandun yung limitation din. So part of it really has to be on the part of teachers, educators. Another question, if all journalists are being censored by their media owners, can the people trust them? Even if they have the urge to report the truth, are they safe?
Ikaw muna, sige. Tatrigger ako ng
Well,
konti.
yeah, syempre. It's one of the problems that we face naman. Pero siguro we have to look at yung levels then of owner interference or influence, no? Meron naman kasi na parang sasabihin, kunyari, wag mong pangalan ng mall kung nasunog, ganyan, no? Very different yung influence doon versus sasabihin na si VP Lenny, parang umamin si Joma na si advisor siya ni VP Lenny. Very different naman siguro yun. No? I think at the heart of each story naman yung process and yung rigor naman nandun, ano, except yung sobrang outlier na lang din talaga na invento, no. And siguro one way to get past yung ganun nga, no, is to read a lot of kuha ng news from a lot of sources. Kunyari, hindi mo gusto yung treatment or yung hindi ka sure sa storya na to ng one newspaper, then you can check Rappler, for example. You can check, paano ba ito ni-report ng iba?
Ako, idagdag ko lang, yung premise na, hindi naman tama sabihin na all reporters are being censored by media owners. May ilan, or siguro marami, pero hindi lahat. And siguro, dapat they have to realize na yung mga reporters, kahit nandun sa ganung situation, many of our colleagues are really struggling to come out with the legitimate story despite the limitations. Kasi kahit paano, you will really have to compromise eh. Ang tanong lang dyan, ano ba yung non-negotiables mo? Kunwari yung media owner mo talagang inutusan yung website na editor, sabihin, palitan mo yung headline, i-take down mo yung story. Ibang usapan yun. Diba? O kaya, baguhin mo yung headline. Edi, sir, kayo na po magpalit kaya tayo ng upuan, kayo na gumawa ng headline. And these things are happening, diba?
Right.
Ang siguro gusto ko idagdag yung kasi sa media matindi ang sense of competition eh.
Mm.
'Di ba yung talagang skupan eh. Uy,
Oo.
ba't nauna yung Philstar, ba't nauna yung Rappler, paano tayo? Ganun eh.
Mm.
Siguro we have to realize even more, although nag-i-improve na over the years, yung may common enemy dito eh. It's not a politician eh. It's not a candidate, but it's the deluge of disinformation. Kung nanonood kayo ng nung Happiness, ganda eh.
Gusto
Yung
ko
sa
sabi.
Netflix,
No.
yung Korean zombie movie.
Habulin ko yan.
Korean.
Hindi, para kasing ganun yung nakikita ko eh. Parang we're dealing with
Zombies.
brainwashed people
Okay.
with a lot of passion and conviction founded on untruths. Yun yung nakakatakot. Parang binubura yung tayo. Kunwari pumalag ka, sabihin mo, hindi, mali yung information mo. Buburahin ka eh. Ikaw ika-cancel. They will overwhelm you with disinformation. Yun yung nararamdaman ko very palpably, especially with the incoming administration.
Right.
And they are getting more and more successful with that. So kailangan siguro self-reinforcing among news organizations. Huwag mong tingnan kunwari yung sila as competition, ako as competition. If they have good content at makakatulong, we share each other's stories. Yun.
And that's a radical proposition. No?
It's
Kasi
actually being
parang,
done
Hindi,
now.
ginagawa
It's
na
being
ngayon.
done now.
First PH.
With
May,
Facts First
may
PH.
consortium kami mga news orgs. Sinishare namin yung ABCB and fact check. Sinishare namin yung
Sige
Rappler
lang
fact
check yung
Ganun.
stories talaga. Kunwari meron silang na-report na maganda, long form stories. O kaya may anyari, diba? Share.
And this is being received well by media owners? Or
Hindi na yan. Tabas
Ano
na
na yun? Parang
Nangyayari na, di ba? Nakita ko eh.
meron naman.
It has to be strengthened.
It has to be
Kulang pa.
Pero yun yung nakikita nyo na moving forward under the Marcos presidency, this is something that we are hoping to see.
It's something that we have to do.
Something we have to do.
At saka malayo na rin ang darating natin. Kasi there was a time na kahit kunyari hindi nag-exist yung GMA, for example. Parang gano'n. Hindi tayo mag-refer to hindi tayo mag-refer to a rival company. Na
Totoo yan.
Ano yun, di ba?
Hindi kino-quote.
Oo.
Okay, na-interview mo na ng Philstar. Babastusan yung Philstar in an interview. Hindi sasabihin in a Philstar interview. Walang ganong common courtesy. Ganong kababaw.
Yeah.
So medyo okay na rin. May progress tayo.
May progress
on that
naman.
front.
Right. We're almost near the end of our conversation. We just want to ask you the question on impunity, right? Why is ending impunity and improving the safety of journalists important for the general public, especially for the youth, and not only for journalists? It's something difficult as well to explain to people, kasi sila lang naman yan, concern lang naman nila yan. But how do you explain it to them?
Well, okay.
Hindi, ikaw muna.
Okay. Sa context na lang ng attacks on journalists, no? UNESCO na rin nagsabi na pag wala na panagot sa attacks on journalists, yung nga, impunity nga, no? It will be more likely na further attacks will happen. And more likely that media will censor themselves para hindi sila maging targets, no? So, talo tayong lahat doon when that happens. Talo ang journalists kasi hindi na magagawa yung best story that they can do. Talo rin yung public kasi hindi mo makukuha yung information na kailangan mo. Yun.
Simple lang. Parang an attack on a journalist is an attack on your right to the truth. I really feel that. Kasi yung journalist siya yung vessel for your right to know. Kasi sila yung may access sa isang presidente, for example. Tapos, kung tatanungin niya yung presidente na, what's your plan on the pandemic? Tapos, sabihin, next question. Diba?
Yeah.
Parang ni-next question mo yung public. Kasi, ayaw mo malaman, ayaw mo sabihin sa journalist. Siya nga yung, gusto mo lang parang sagutin yung mga easy to ask, easy to answer questions. So, diba? Parang, do you want to live in a world where the only information you get is information that the powerful want you to know? Need to know basis lang yung totoo. Diba? Gusto mo ba mabuhay sa mundong yun? Ganun lang kasimple talaga.
And zombies will say yes.
Ako to
Yes, Lord.
To flesh those points mentioned by them further. Example lang ganito, no? Kunwari, may 5 tumatakbo for president. This is not a partisan example. May 5 tumatakbo for president. Lahat yan, bubusisiin mo kung sino may corruption issue. Kasi baka nakawan kayo tayo, as a people. Hindi sasabihin sa inyo nun, yun, ng mga paid propagandists nila, ng mga TikTokers or influencers nila. Kasi bayad nila yun Sasabihin nila, candidate A, B, C, D, and E. Magagaling kami lahat. Wala magsasabi nun. Hindi rin sasabihin sa inyo nun ng mga paid journalist nila. Yung binayaran nilang journalist, papapogiin, papagandahin sila. Pero yung matitinong journalist na dinadrown out nila yung boses, yung sinisikil nila yung karapatan, yun yung magsasabi sa inyo, okay, si candidate A, naku, mag-ingat kayo dyan kasi meron talagang record of corruption yan. Ito, okay naman, pero medyo human rights violator yan. Ito, incompetent to Kaya, busisiin nyo. Hindi naman sasabihin sa'yo ng journalist kung sino iboto mo Ilalahad lang lahat yan para makapili kayo ng matino. Bakit? Kasi paano pag nagnakaw yan? Paano pag kayo pinatay niyan pag nanalo? Paano i-regret nyo? Dapat pala nakinig ako sa journalist, hindi dito kay vlogger na ganito. Diba? Mahirap na ma-realize na nasa huling pagsisisi. And worse niyan, yung iba talagang brainwash na. Diba? To use Duterte's example, pag nag-drugs ka raw, liliit yung utak mo, diba? Yun yung nangyayari sa disinformation. Kasi may sasabihin sa'yo, lahat naman wala akong pakialam. Wala akong pakialam kahit ano pang sabihin nyo. Ito opinion ko, diba? Pag kayo po ninakawan na, hindi nyo naman sasabi respect my opinion. Pag talaga yung beneficyon dapat mapunta sa inyo, pero binursa nung iniluklok nyo sa pwesto, walang sisihan. Ang problema, damay-damay po tayo lahat. Hindi lang kayo.
Actually, another way to look at it, yung instant gratification kasi talaga yung nakukuha natin sa pag-engage sa vloggers, all of these content that we see online. We want to immediately feel good about what we're reading, right? So, yung minsan, yung content ng journalists, ng legitimate, ay mas long game, mas long term pa yung magiging effect sa kanila had they elected this president, for example, or another politician. Hindi nila maramdaman agad yung gaan sa pakiramdam. And I think yun yung another way, instead of simply looking at them as brainwashed or parang devoid completely of agency and ability to think. Minsan may ganun tayong kahinaan or vulnerability as people siguro na that's the thin line that we're trying to figure out as journalists. No? We provide them that instant gratification, but at the same time we give them a promise na if you keep on engaging with our content, with our work, then there's good stuff that you can expect. No? Perhaps to wrap up our discussion, I want to invite our guests to, I don't know, maybe if you have any campaigns you want to promote or your work you want to promote, this is the time that you chase the clout, chase your clout. And any words you want to leave our audience. Let's start with you, Christian.
Sige. Ito, by force of necessity, I had to open a YouTube channel. By force of necessity. Because I used to be part of the legacy media. But my program was terminated, was killed. Okay? So, ayaw ko na sabihin yung reason, pero it's quite obvious, di ba? So, ginawa ko, pinalakas ko yung podcast ko and YouTube channel. Doon ko na-realize yung sinasabi nila. Pag kinonvert mo into Filipino yung conversation, pag ginawa mo more personable yung discussion sa mga issues, kasi makikinig sa'yo. Kasi I started yung podcast English Akala ko kasi English lang dun So, nung ginawa ko siyang Filipino, tapos ginawa ko siyang live, so mas nagkaroon ng ongoing conversations. Mas dumami trolls, sa totoo lang. Mas matindi yung pressure. Pero I realize, mas marami pa palang nanonood doon kaysa rin sa program ko dati sa ANC. Pero, kasi naisip ko dati, maski mag-English ka na mag-English sa program, meron ka ng specific segment na nakaka-capture Pero dito, paano may papaliwanag doon sa ordinary people yung problema ng political dynasties? Diba? Mas nagkakaroon ng engagement. So sa akin, nakatulong yun. It's not that I wanted to be there, but I was forced to be there. Kasi I was deplatformed at the height of the election campaign.
Right.
So sa akin, ang point ko lang doon, na-realize ko, may opportunity sa mga journalists to engage people more in a platform where they are. Yan.
I'm sorry. Mabuti talaga yun.
MWF po. Facts first,
MWF.
Untitled, 7:30.
Right. All
Yeah.
right. Take note of that. Facts first.
Mhm.
Untitled sa YouTube. This is on YouTube. MWF. Right. Pia.
Ano lang, parang just read us. Read the journalists
Yan. Tama.
who are on the ground trying to deliver you the news. Parang sige, kung di talaga ma-let go yung ano niyo, yung vlogger na gusto niyo, okay lang naman yun. Just, include us in your information diet because that will also inform you kung ano na naririnig mo sa vlogger na gusto mo, 'di ba? Baka ano lang siya additional information that you might use to better weigh and assess yung mga naririnig mo sa social media, sa vlogger na gusto mo, sa family mo, 'di ba? So yun, just include us in your information diet and kasi yung news na binibigay namin sa inyo, 'di ba? Ano yan on the ground yan, verified yan, vignette yan, dumaan yan sa isang proseso. We work really hard to deliver that news to you. So, yun. We hope you can still patronize, be patrons to our work.
And Jonathan.
Siguro ano lang. So like promote ang media community, no? Maraming criticism sa how kunyari yung press con ng spokesperson ni Marcos na maraming criticism sa hanay natin na journalists na parang bakit hindi daw nag-stand up, no, during that press con. Tama naman yon. But also we have to keep in mind na for a lot of us medyo bago rin itong bagong landscape na to, no? So sige, call out natin yung mga kasama natin but also helpful then to support each other. Tapos so just then if you feel na a journalist has done a good job, why not let them know, 'di ba? I mean, kaysa naman sa minumura-mura lang kami palagi ng anonymous, 'di ba? Okay rin naman para hey, good job. Why not?
Gusto ko yun. Gusto ko yung last na, no? Kasi parang bihira, no?
Very rare, very rare.
And of course, that's something that journalists do not really ask for or really expect, no? But it's a good thing if the public can actually show more appreciation to these folks, hardworking folks who have been through a lot, over the past how many years na ang bilis tumanda sa work na ito with all of the challenges. This conversation has opened a lot of new ideas. I hope our audiences were able to take note of them, all of the tips, the advice, and the notes on the challenges and what solutions can we take on how we can support the press so we can, remain free, remain vibrant, and continue what we're doing. So with that, we want to thank Christian Esguerra, Jonathan De Santos, and Pia Ranada for all of the insights that you have shared with us today. And of course, for the work that you do, which I suppose you will be going to go back to after this conversation. At this point, we want to say thank you to all of our audience, everyone who watched our show, our event today. That's it for this episode. Thank you for joining us and make sure to share this live stream so more people can watch it. And use our hashtags, #ChatUp and #RealTalkRealImpact. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channel, Quarantalk Media, and follow us on Facebook for more updates and programs at Quarantalk Media. And we're also on Twitter at Quarantalk Media. And as we will leave you with an overview of and as we go, we will leave you with an overview of an initiative that helps with media literacy and battling disinformation in the online space. That's up next on The Spotlight. I am Marlon Ombrado. Connect with me online at OOTB Media Literacy on Facebook and OOTB Media Lit on Instagram. Join us again next month for another Real Talk here on #ChatUp. Real Talk, Real Impact. Have a great week, everyone.
Facts First PH is an initiative media outlet, Rappler. Over 150 organizations, media coalitions, civil society groups, business organizations, and research and legal groups have joined together for a fight against disinformation on social media. The initiative aims to debunk dubious claims online, make facts spread faster than hate and lies, flag disinformation, and hold online perpetrators accountable. Through the website factsfirst.ph, individuals and organizations can share facts, report dubious claims, and sign up to join the movement.